Hello! Wow, what a moment. I think this is probably one of the most historic, well, it's a very interesting day in the history of Hollywood and in its entirety. I will say we have a lot to go over. I expect this stream to take about an hour and a half. There will be a supersized Q&A at the end because I know a lot of you have a lot of questions. We have 3 chapter times to go through on subjects, and there's a lot of drama. We have some fantastic drama about Paramount. There's going to be a lot of juicy stuff in here, and I'm going to try and answer all your questions about the IP that you care about the most. And I've put the IP here that's in play. I put an asterisk next to Mortal Kombat because they didn't really clarify what they're going to do about the Warner Brothers gaming. So I'm curious to see what they decide about that. I want to say off the bat that I don't think this is going to happen. I think that everyone will do everything in their power to stop it. Not only from the government, but I also believe from within the industry. And it's because Ted Sarandos, the head of Netflix, won't keep his mouth shut. I want to start with a statement that he made. And he said, Variety just posted this. And they said, when asked if Netflix is destroying Hollywood, co-CEO Ted Sarandos said, no, we are saving Hollywood. We're in a period of transition. Folks grew up thinking, I want to make movies on a gigantic screen and have strangers watch them, and to have them play in the theater for 2 months and people cry in sold out shows, and saying that's an outdated concept. Don't forget who's the head of the DGA, Mr. Christopher Nolan. He will take them to court. The WGA has also already threatened to sue. And I think that is going to be, I think this will never happen. Okay, so let's go through it. There's a lot to discuss, I think that's a shocking statement to make. I saw somebody say online that Ted Sarandos couldn't keep up the charade for 24 hours. It's shocking that he would admit these things before the deal was done. It's really, really crazy. Like, I just want to point out to you that like a movie like Clayface would never go to theaters. It would never happen. Ted Sarandos would think it would be silly to release that film in theaters. And that's kind of what you're dealing with. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about movies like Sinners and Weapons. Remember, Zach Krieger had a deal with Netflix that fell through because Netflix refused a strong theatrical release. And I think that you're going to have a really interesting situation here. All right, so as I said, we have a tremendous amount to get through, as you're going to see from our very first page. That's page 1 of 3. But is he wrong, says James. Well, James, some people just want to watch Hollywood burn to the ground, and those people today are quite happy, and we're going to discuss that. I think it's like, I just want to say on a side note, it's a little bit like when everyone said, why do we have to buy American? Why don't we buy the cheapest thing we can get, and who cares where it's made or how it's made? And look where that got us. So I just want you to think about that. I want you to think about the slop that's going to be just shoveled down your throats if this is allowed to. I'm a little annoyed about it. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's get started. Okay. There will be a supersized 20-minute Q&A at the end. Thank you, George. Thank you. Okay. We'll do the poll at the end, Madav. We'll do the poll at the end, when we're doing the Q&A. But, please, I want to make sure that this is a stream that can be enjoyed also after the live. So I'm going to work my way through these topics. And then at the end, I will do the live Q&A. Okay? All right, so let's get started. Is this good or bad? It's pretty bad. I spoke to a number of people I know in the industry this morning, and almost all of them want it to fail. So that's the industry. I think it's very bad for the industry. It's good for people who want to watch stuff at home, but I think that that's a short-sighted position to take. Now, Netflix is buying it for $83 billion. and they expect this new company to emerge in Q3 2026. All right, so that would be late summer, September of next year. But that is assuming, first Warner Brothers has to split into two. We're going to talk about exactly what Netflix bought. Warner Brothers has to split into two, and then the film studios and the streaming services will become part of Netflix, and that will become a new company that will go on the stock market. And shareholders at Warner Brothers will get some Netflix shares, etc. And they'll also get shares of the Discovery company that has everything that's left that Netflix didn't buy. So that is, if everything goes according to plan, will be available the end of the third quarter next year, assuming that they don't have a lot of regulatory roadblocks and lawsuits. Okay, so will this ever happen? Let's see. I will say that they matched Paramount's offer of $5 billion to Warner Brothers if the deal doesn't go through. So even if this doesn't work out, Netflix has agreed to pay, just as Paramount would have, $5 billion to Netflix as a sorry it didn't work out apology. So that's amazing. So is this an antitrust? That is something that a couple of senators have already spoken out about. There was an anonymous letter from people in the industry to people in both parties saying that this should be blocked. So they're going to have a lot of questions. I hope Netflix saves some money to pay for their legal team and also to line the pockets of the people who have to approve this. And that's the thing, because Netflix is a global force at this point, they have to get approval not just from the United States, but the governments across the globe have to approve this. And for instance, the UK was already very upset with Netflix. They feel that they put a lot of money through the BBC into their local, money that they used to support. The UK in particular, the government does a lot to support the arts. And they're frustrated that a lot of those people go on to work at Netflix, which is a free market. So they just have to make stronger contracts going forward at the BBC and stuff. So why would it be antitrust? Well, because they would be so big, I think it's conceivable, Mr. Wallace-Shawn, I think it's conceivable that you wouldn't have to go to anywhere else for entertainment. Netflix, everybody wants a competitive market. That's what's best for commerce. The government's supposed to protect that, not just in the United States, but all governments. And you really would only need Netflix, Warner Brothers. There would be no reason no reason for that. And that's true, Danny. I think that Netflix is going to point to Disney and YouTube and say they're just as big. But I think that Netflix is a bigger streaming service. It's the biggest streaming service in the world. They have a much larger reach, and they've gotten away with that in the past because they've only been a streaming service. But now that they're going to have Warner Brothers, I think it's going to seem very much like an antitrust situation. Now, let's say somehow, by some miracle, they get the governments, even though Trump, of course, is a personal friend of the Ellisons, and they get all the governments of the world to come together and say, okay, well, then they're going to get sued. The WGA already threatened to sue. The DGA has said they want to have a meeting. And the Producers Guild also said this morning they are deeply concerned. And then, of course, there's SAG. Every single union is going to sue. So that's going to be a major issue. Now, why would they sue? Why would they be upset about this? Netflix is claiming, right, that they are going to be creating tons of work for everybody. Thanks, Emma. Well, I spoke to an industry friend this morning, and I asked that very question. And my industry friend, this particular one, pointed out that the problem with Netflix is they're going to drive down earnings. Okay, so my friend made a really great example. My friend said, take Die Hard, okay? Die Hard is a very successful movie, obviously, and it's been successful for decades at this point. And recently, somebody who worked on the film was on Celebrity Weakest Link. And Jane Lynch, they were debating whether or not it was a Christmas movie. And Jane Lynch said, this is very easy to solve. Do your residuals jump up at the end of the year every year when people rewatch the movie for Christmas? And this person said, heck yeah. At the end of the year, this person gets a huge check from people watching Die Hard every single Christmas. And that has been a way that the industry has helped people. You know, most people in Hollywood don't have a consistent paycheck. So the dream is that you have one big hit and you live off that for the rest of your life. You might not be a millionaire, but you're certainly very comfortable and you're able to sustain yourself until hopefully you get another big break. Netflix doesn't pay residuals because they're a streaming service and they hide a lot of their data, particularly for smaller things. So that is just totally going to destroy the ability for people to have residuals. And how on earth are you going to be able to sustain yourself in this business when employment is not continuous? So that's what everybody's fearing. And also that you don't get your due for this thing that you created. You don't get to participate in its success for as long as it exists. So the industry is absolutely furious about the loss of residuals. I still get checks for Zombieland too. And I had like 2-3 lines. I still get checks. All right. I mean, they're very small at this point, but I still get checks. Okay. What could have been? All right. You know, let's talk about what might have happened. So obviously, everybody wanted Comcast to buy it. Everyone's like, crap. Like Comcast, it's really sad. It seems like Comcast was never even in this situation. Like they weren't even really competing. Now, Comcast just split into 2 companies itself. And Universal, its movie business, is now its own thing. And their idea was to combine Universal and Warner Brothers into a single company. It would have been so beautiful. But that's not going to happen. So now you have to think to yourself, well, what the heck is Universal even going to do now that it's so tiny? It's a wimpy little movie studio now, just out in the cold, shivering by itself while surrounded by these giants. What's it going to do? I'll tell you what's going to happen. Somebody's going to buy Universal, is what I would guess, because you just can't compete anymore against these mega studios that are arising. So I think you're going to see continued consolidation because of this. I think that Apple didn't want to buy a movie studio before. Amazon feels they already paid for MGM and also Bond. But now they're going to be like, damn, look how much bigger Netflix is. Netflix just totally jumped ahead. So I think that Apple and Amazon are going to have to go studio shopping. And I think studios are going to want to be bought because now they're just too small. That's right. Paramount could maybe buy Universal. That would be bizarre. That's something that they could do. You know, instead of David Ellison fighting, well, wait till we talk about Paramount in just a moment. I'll be curious to see if the Ellisons sell Paramount maybe. But that's interesting. But yes, I mean, Universal now might go on the shopping block or on the sales block because it's just sitting there by itself. And now it's too small to exist. Let's talk about Paramount. Oh my God, what a disaster this is turning out to be. The tea on this is piping hot. Get ready for some political crazy insanity hijinks. Okay, pull up a chair, my friends. The Ellisons. Oh, they've turned into the Potters quicker than I could have imagined. I think that they're getting the Elon Musk treatment. You know, Elon Musk, people really liked him before he bought Twitter and became so, in the Trump-verse. You know, I think the Ellisons, who nobody knew who they were before this, are going to find themselves right next to Elon Musk. I think they're really definitely going to go in that direction. I also wonder if they're even going to still want Paramount at this point, because the whole plan was to get Warner Brothers. Remember, they were making offers before Warner Brothers was even officially up for sale. I mean, they always were, but, you know, Paramount made like 5 offers on this thing. They sent out a letter saying they felt this was unfair. So I'm glad you think it's fascinating, Steve. I think this is pretty amazing. So yeah, I think there's a chance they might say, well, let's just get out of this. Because now what are they going to do? Remember, Ellison said us getting Warner Brothers will decide if we're in the top 3 or the bottom 3 when it comes to the studios. Now they're too tiny. They have no IP. What the heck are they going to do? Maybe try and buy Universal. But, welcome to Megamount. I saw somebody call them that on Twitter last night. And I thought it was great. I was like, that could stick. That's really, really strong. because the things that they're doing, you might feel, oh, is that unfair? I don't think so, because wait till I tell you this tea. Oh my God. All right, so I think the turning point was when they agreed to distribute Rush Hour 4. This is shocking. So, Donald Trump made it seem like he just likes comedies from the 90s, but that's a lie. In fact, he and Brett Ratner have been working together for quite some time at this point. In fact, Brett Ratner has been camped out at Mar-a-Lago making the Melania Trump documentary, which is about to air on Amazon so that Amazon can be friends with Trump as well. That's what Brett Ratner's been doing with his life. Now, Brett Ratner, some of you might remember this. Brett Ratner is not just someone who made one or two little mistakes. Brett Ratner has a history of not only harassing his talent on staff. You might recall Elliot Page's stories about being in X-Men 3. I think Olivia Munn also spoke out about Brett Ratner. But don't forget that Brett Ratner honey-trapped Kevin Sujihara into doing the Rat Pack funding. That's right. Mystic remembers. He and Brett Ratner and his business partner got a special needs actress to agree to sleep with Kevin Sujihara. Oh, wow. Thanks, Blix. So that Kevin Sujihara would use their funding company to bankroll Warner Brothers. And this actress felt she was going to get acting roles off of it. And she was so upset when she didn't, she blew the whole thing wide open, and Kevin Sujihara had to resign. That's who Brett Ratner is. And everybody in Hollywood passed on Rush Hour 4 because nobody wanted to be associated with Brett Ratner. In fact, it was just reported that the heads of the film division at Paramount had passed on Rush Hour 4 and only discovered that they were making and distributing the film when Trump announced it. The Ellisons never even informed them that they had made this deal. So I think you're going to see an exodus of talent. I can't believe John Chu just signed on for Paramount. John Chu just got lured away. I'm like, John Chu, are you going to stand next to Brett Ratner in company photos? Like, this is the situation that we find ourselves in. But it gets worse. Oh my God. The media has knives out for Paramount. I saw such a hit piece, it was shocking. All right, so this was a hit piece about how the culture is changing at Paramount, where they told the head of Paramount Animation that she completely torpedoed their IP, like Smurfs and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And she said, I don't appreciate how you spoke to me. And they said, get over it. And on the one hand, you're like, well, she did kind of torpedo their IP. It is piping hot, right, X-Men superfan? But on the other hand, like, you still shouldn't speak to people in a disrespectful manner. Like, what's it going to be like for women and people of color at Paramount now? Are they just going to run around MAGA style, like pew, 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 and just go around telling everybody to shut up and they hate them? Like, it's like, it makes you really nervous as to what's going to go on over there. Now, in this very same article, they came for Josh Goldstein. So Josh Goldstein, everyone's been saying how great this guy is. He was the marketing guru at Warner Brothers who launched Barbie into the stratosphere. Everybody said this guy's amazing. Now that he works for Paramount and the Ellisons, they pulled up his file. And I think it's interesting that when he was at Warner Brothers, nobody mentioned any of this, which just goes to show you how shady the reporting is still to this day, even post Me Too, that this wasn't brought up when he was with people that everyone liked. So it seems that back in the day, Josh Goldstein was investigated for sexually harassing people. I believe it's Sony maybe, but it's a studio that he was working at. It was investigated, and it was so bad that he was fired. Now, eventually he sued for wrongful termination, and he did get a severance check of a substantial amount, but nobody knows exactly what happened because there was an NDA. But it's even worse. Well, it can't get worse than sexual harassment, but there's more. If you go even further back into Josh Goldstein's career, if you might recall, a long time ago, a movie called A Knight's Tale came out. And the people who worked on the marketing for it made up 2 critics' quotes that they slapped on the advertising. And the movie studio was sued for false advertising. And one of those 2 people was Josh Goldstein, who made up those quotes. So, like, I just can't believe that this was not reported beforehand and everyone just forgot about it. No one bothered to bring it up. But just to show you how people in the industry and the trades are now gunning for the Ellisons, they suddenly start bringing it up. They're like, oh yeah, you want to talk about Paramount and the Ellisons? Let's talk about it. And you're like, where were you for like the last 5 or 6 years? So this is incredible. They also said that the Ellisons like to hire people who've been canceled because they're cheap, motivated, and they don't believe in cancel culture. So who the heck is going to be standing next to John Chu? Is he going to have, he's going to be standing next to Brett Ratner and maybe Mel Gibson? Like, I'd be like, whoa, John Chu, good luck over there. So this is nuts. Absolutely nuts. Now, the other question is David Ellison going to go nuclear? If he can't have Warner Brothers, can anyone? And I think, Larry Ellison, who is an extremely vindictive person, I think look what he did to Stephen Colbert. I think there's a very strong chance they will tell Donald Trump to absolutely nuke this. Just nuke this deal. Even if they can't get it, no one can have it. And I think that is something that very much could happen. So let's see. So how's that for tea? Oh, I couldn't believe that. Oh my God. I just don't know what's going to happen at Paramount. I think they're going to have a hard time attracting talent over there. Okay. And I do think MAGA Mount is going to stick because it's very funny. All right, so Hollywood and technology. I think this has been a huge problem for the industry with data points, AI. I think that technology is destroying Hollywood. Everyone always says, oh, we're going to use it responsibly, but I don't see it being used responsibly. Just a few years ago, Barry was making jokes about taking development meetings with having to be told what the algorithm is saying. And look where we are now. Look what's happened. There have been a lot of tremors over the past few years and even a couple of scary moments. But this is truly the big one where it looks like the ground has fallen out beneath Hollywood. But also, I want to talk about Wall Street, Hollywood and Wall Street. What an absolute disaster this has turned out to be. Who made this decision? Again, I was talking to another industry friend and they said, well, don't forget that that's not like Zaslav made this decision all on his own. Both the Netflix board of directors and the board of directors at Warner Brothers agreed to this. Well, that's the problem. They're not motivated by artistry or the history of Hollywood or, the magic of the movies. When you watch Seth Rogen's The Studio, you can see that even though people get upset about executives even themselves care about the legacy of Hollywood. Of course, people come to Hollywood to get rich, but it's also to be a part of that movie magic. But people on Wall Street don't care about movie magic. They don't care about what's going to happen to Warner Brothers Netflix, this new company, in 5 years. They just want to know if they're going to make their money now. They can sell their stock. They don't have to take this ride if it starts to look bad. So every single person who decided to agree to this, okay, did it only on the context of whether or not they're going to make money off of it. And I think that is a new situation for Hollywood, where in the past, at least it was, artistry and Hollywood history and the legacy of the industry and what's important about it and why people got into this business in the first place. At least that had a seat at the table. Now, as for David Zaslav, now he probably feels because he didn't sell to MAGA Mount that, maybe things aren't so bad. Maybe he loves to throw these star-studded dinners. I think he's going to be surprised maybe how people feel about the fact that he just completely destroyed Hollywood. So people are going to be upset about that. Like, ultimately, he's the same guy who canceled Coyote versus Acme and stripped a lot of content off of the streaming services because he didn't want to pay any, even the smallest of payouts. And so he was the same guy he was when we first met him. It's like that famous saying, when people tell you who they are, listen. And we clocked him, although I think he did a pretty good job of making everybody feel that maybe he turned around a little bit. But no, I think that it's the same guy he was when he signed on to and from day one, I told you his goal was to flip this company. And boy, did he flip it. He flipped all of Hollywood. And don't forget, he is personally, maybe not exactly $500 million, because that was based on $30 a share, and Netflix is paying $28 a share. We're only on the first of 3 pages of topics, guys. I'm going to get to all this stuff. But David Zaslav is personally going to make somewhere close to $500 million off of this. Himself. That's what it costs to sell out Hollywood. $500 million. And he was making, let me just tell you, as the head of Warner Brothers, he was already making tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. I think one of his paydays was like $250 or something. The guy's made a ton of money. It's not like he wasn't getting paid. And that's where, you know, again, I'm all for, you know, I'm a big fan of business and stuff like that, but I think we're getting to a point where it's just completely out of control, you know, and that's like, I think, a really big problem. Okay, page 2. Boop. Oh man, all right, let's talk about, now that's like what's going on. Let's talk about what's happening. Price is Right rules, baby. They outbid Paramount by $1 per share, but still they outbid them by $1 per share. Paramount only went up. I wonder if David Ellison's like, if only I'd offered 29, although he couldn't even really afford the 27 that he offered because he had to partner with the Saudis on the deal. But Netflix, they found the cash somehow, and they said, all right, we'll give you $28 per share, and that was the highest bid. You know, it's not like Zaslav was like, oh, who should I pick? What would be good for the industry? You know, he picked the highest bidder. He was like, what's the highest number? There it is. Boop. All right. And also, of course, they agreed to this $5 billion guarantee, even if the deal falls through. Paramount is the one that came up with that. Paramount said, we'll pay you $5 billion, even if this doesn't work out. And so Netflix was like, we'll do that too. And they won the bid. Okay, so old school Hollywood just lost its advantage. You know, up until now, remember, the whole reason Netflix got into original content back in the day with House of Cards was that the studios started to pull their content from them because they saw how much money Netflix was making. And they said, why should we just give it to you? We'll start our own services or license it to you. And so Netflix started making original content. And they've only been doing it for a little bit. So they don't have the libraries of the other studios. So now that they own Warner Brothers, no studio can claim, well, unless they tank Warner Brothers, which is very possible. But for the time being, now I think they only really match Disney. I think Disney and Netflix are, you know, Netflix has so many more subscribers, but, you know, everybody else is just left in the dust. I mean, this is a sobering new dawn for Hollywood. Whereas I told you, Paramount, Universal, I mean, Lionsgate's just a little blip on Hollywood's radar at this point. Even Sony. These studios are now so ridiculously small. You're like, I don't even know what to say. That's how tiny they are. So yes, it's the rise of the mega studio. Disney started its own streaming service and bought Fox so they can compete with Netflix, and Netflix just leapfrogged ahead yet again. So Netflix is still once again the leader in the industry, but Disney is, I think, the only studio that can compete with them at this point. Nobody else can compete, which is a real problem, a huge problem for every other studio. You have Netflix and Disney, and then everybody else is going to start. It's going to be a big game of musical chairs where everybody else is going to have to join together. Now, what are they going to do? Are they going to keep Warner Brothers as an entity that just continues to function, only now Netflix pays their bills and gets their content? That's what Netflix has said, but they also said they would honor theatrical, and in less than 24 hours, they backpedaled on that hardcore. There's always layoffs when there's a consolidation like this. There were massive layoffs when Disney bought Fox. There were massive layoffs when Skydance acquired Paramount. And the industry is just shrinking, not only from consolidation, but from technology and AI. They just don't need as many people to do the jobs anymore. So the question is, what are people going to do? Are they going to hold out at Warner Brothers and see what happens? Are they going to try and jump ship while there's less people in the job market? And where are they going to go as this consolidation continues? There's not going to be just as many jobs. There's just not going to be as many places to get hired. So it's going to be really, really difficult. We'll see what happens. All right. Also, this is pretty shocking. Netflix gets all of Warner Brothers' production facilities, which includes the historic Warner Brothers lot in Hollywood, which is incredible. It's absolutely an incredible studio lot. And the fact that it's going to go is, I mean, let's see how Netflix handles it, but it's really bizarre. I mean, I think people are worried about what's going to happen to the Paramount lot. The Fox lot, not what it was. And that was really iconic as well. But then this will blow your mind even more. Leavesden in the UK, Leavesden Studios, where they have the Warner Brothers studio tour, that is now owned or would be owned by Netflix. Thank you, Emma. That's insane. That's now a Netflix facility. So that's just a huge thing as well. All right. Netflix just became an IP monster. They have all this IP that they are just getting, and then, of course, their own IP. They have a ton of IP already over at Netflix. Netflix has, they've really taken to creating original content. And so they have a lot of stuff as well. In fact, again, the only studio that can match them in terms of IP is Disney. Future Movie says Warner Brothers New Line owns Rush Hour. Yes, Warner Brothers passed on it because they didn't want to work with Brett Ratner. Duh. So that's why Paramount is distributing it. Future Movie Active. But nice try. Okay. So if you just want that explanation, Warner Brothers had first right of refusal, but said no thank you. So that's why Paramount will be distributing the film. All right, so back to the discussion. So they have the only studio that can match this IP is Disney. And I think that you're going to see the same treatment of IP as Disney does. How many artistic films is Disney making? None. They are just an IP machine. They churn out IP all the time. They put that IP to work. And that's what Netflix is probably going to do. I think Netflix doesn't care if they make a Sinners or a Weapons or a One Battle After Another. They want to make this IP. They want the Dune. They want Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, Wonka, Beetlejuice, Matrix, all this stuff. That's all they care about. And I think that's what they're going to push really, really hard. So I think that you're going to see a lot of that. And then the question becomes, with all of this, is it going to theaters or is it going to go to streaming? Like, where do these things go? But I do think you're going to see a Disney level of focus, hyper focus on IP. Now, what about art house? Netflix does do very well in the awards race every year. They do make art house films. And in fact, when you look at people's top 10s for the year, a lot of the movies are, Netflix films. In fact, I would say in some cases, I saw almost half the list was Netflix movies. So it's not like they don't make films that are highbrow. But would they make a One Battle After Another? Does that have any real value to them? Like, why would Netflix care about that? I guess they want an Oscar winner, but would, Paul Thomas Anderson want to work with Netflix? He didn't, because remember, all of these are very highly regarded films that Netflix is releasing for the award season will only play in theaters for about 2 to 3 weeks. And then they went to the streaming service and they did not get wide releases. So let's see. And yeah, I think Guillermo del Toro did very well with Frankenstein, but Knives Out, that franchise has had a very difficult time. Let's see. So I think that this is, and I know that you guys, how many of you saw Frankenstein in theaters though? That's, I think, an important question you have to ask yourself. How many of you saw Frankenstein in theaters? Or did you stream it? Okay, I mean, what about the whole IMAX or 70 millimeters, etc., right? Then here's the other thing. Coyote versus Acme. Netflix never would have shelved that. They would have stuck it on the streaming service. And that's something else that you have to consider. Sure, that movie would have been saved, but it never would have seen theaters. And so you have to ask yourself how you feel about that. Then what about Sinners and Weapons? Now, these are 2 awards contenders. What a great surprise. But nobody would ever, I think, really, Sinners, of course, they hoped it would be, but Sinners is a very genre-esque movie as well. Would Netflix ever make these movies? And here's the other question. Would they have put them in theaters? Would Sinners have gone to theaters? Maybe if I think it would have a similar Frankenstein situation, but I don't believe that Weapons would have gone to theaters. I think Weapons would have been a streaming film. In fact, as I said, Zach Krieger had a deal with Netflix and walked away from it because they couldn't make him a strong enough promise for theatrical. So I can tell you that for sure that Weapons probably wouldn't have gone to theaters because of Zach Krieger's situation. So I think that you have a real issue in the types of movies that get made because Netflix has a different criteria for the movies they put out than a studio does. That's something really important to remember. I had an industry friend text me and say that Ted Sarandos hates movie theaters. I mean, he actually does not like the experience. And I think that have someone like that own Warner Brothers is crazy. Now, another industry friend of mine pointed out that this is really going to help A24. Because A24, who's becoming more commercial, by the way, A24, who has Marty Supreme coming out later this month, A24 is going to be a place where people who still love film and want their movies and still have the dream of their film playing in theaters are going to go. So you're going to see A24, I think, is best poised to do this, but perhaps there might be some other studios that step forward, or are formed potentially, right? Like what will fill the vacuum? How will people fight this? Nolan, of course, ended up going to Universal. He was so upset about how Warner Brothers handled streaming during the pandemic, which was a choice, by the way. Remember, that guy came from Hulu. What was his name again? Jason something? Remember he briefly ran Warner Brothers and he made Christopher Nolan so upset that Christopher Nolan left the studio that had given him his career and went over to Universal, which won him an Oscar, by the way. But that is incredible. So this is, thank you, Jason Killard. But yeah, this is going to, Keelar. But this is going to mean a lot to some filmmakers, and they're going to stay away from Netflix Warner Brothers. The Wrap even had a story just about 2 or 3 weeks ago about how Netflix was having trouble attracting some talent because they couldn't make a strong enough promise for theatrical. Whew, so what did Netflix buy? All right, so Netflix said they bought the Warner Brothers studio. And by the way, I'm so happy to see so many people tuning in. Even if you're not a member, I see you, and I'm so happy you're here, and I'm having a great time discussing this with you. So what did they buy? They bought the film studios and the streaming service. Now that means they're not, of course, they don't want any of the Discovery stuff, but they also didn't buy CNN. Netflix has no need for a news service. They don't care about a news service. They don't want to get into politics. So CNN is still, now part of this other company. And we'll see what happens to CNN. But they have not been purchased by Netflix. Yeah, I don't know who would want to buy CNN, William. We'll see. All right, so what about Warner Brothers Games? There was no clarification on that, at least not yet. But while Hollywood doesn't seem that interested in that, I think that is a huge question that needs to be answered pretty quickly. What's happening to Warner Brothers Games, which is quite successful? I mean, everybody's having a tough time right now. But Warner Brothers has been one of the few gaming companies in Hollywood that's done very well. So what's going to happen there? Netflix is getting into the gaming space, right? But not in that way. Netflix has games that you can play on their website or on a website or an app and stuff like that. Netflix doesn't make games for gaming systems. Netflix doesn't produce games for PlayStation, and Xbox, right? So I don't know if Netflix wants to be in that business. They have not clarified on that. So we have to get that. I mean, I'm surprised nobody's asked that question, who can get to them. And I think it's interesting they haven't answered that question. All right. Mega streaming service. This, I think, is what's the most interesting to Netflix. I don't know who could compete with them at this point because they've now combined Netflix and HBO. Oh my God. I guess Disney Plus and Hulu is conceivably the only one who could compete with that, but that's just shocking. I mean, it's just, that's where you start to feel like maybe this is an antitrust situation. So Netflix and HBO are now in one place. White Lotus is a Netflix show. House of the Dragon is a Netflix show. All this stuff is Netflix. Welcome to Derry is now a Netflix show, which is on the same network now as Stranger Things. We were saying they were so similar. Now they're owned by the same company. All right, so not only do they want to be a huge streaming service going forward, but they want the Warner Brothers and HBO libraries. Do you want to watch all the old Game of Thrones episodes? Do you want to watch Friends back on Netflix? You want to watch older White Lotus episodes? You want to, I mean, I don't know who would go back to The Last of Us, but all this stuff, you got to go and you got to watch. Now you go on Netflix. Now, some of you are going to love that. You're going to be like, oh my God, my Netflix subscription just got more valuable. And we're going to talk about the potential situation that they're going to raise your price because look how much more value they're giving you. So that is huge. All right, then I think another question people have, I'm not sure how it would work internationally, Sophia. That's a great question. A lot of HBO content airs on other networks in other countries. Like, for instance, in the UK, it's on Sky. I'm sure that Netflix would eventually end those contracts because they want the content. I mean, they have to honor the contracts, so they'll either wait for them to end or they'll try and buy them out because Netflix is a global service. But those local governments are going to say that's antitrust because Sky might sue. I didn't even think of that. Sky's like, HBO is a huge amount of our company, so they might sue. So that is a very big situation as well. All right, are they going to keep HBO's weekly 9 p.m. release strategy? Huge question. That is a huge question to ask. What will happen to HBO content? We've been comparing, like think of the experience of Stranger Things versus Welcome to Derry. The Stranger Things conversation burned a lot faster, but I think a lot brighter. But that is like, what are they going to do? Right? No, I think that, Madav, I think that Netflix content would stay as binging. But what about, the real question is, will HBO content go to the binge route? That's the question. That's right. Everyone's going to sue. Okay. Now, how will HBO exist? Will it be a separate service or will it, there's no way it'll be a separate service. No way. There's no way it'll be a separate service. They'll fold it into Netflix. But the real question is, does it just become a brand in Netflix or does it become its own portal within the service? Like, when you go onto the Netflix and you see the interface, it's crazy. And by the way, the interface is totally organized by AI these days based on what you click on. Sometimes there'll be a hot new show and I have to search for it. I'm like, why isn't it on the front of the site? So that's crazy. Like you might just have HBO shows, just like how weird it looks with Hulu folded into Disney Plus. And you're like, what's this Hulu show doing smack in the middle of all my Disney content? You're going to go on to Netflix and you'll be like, oh, there's Game of Thrones between The Diplomat and Nobody Wants This. And you're going to be like, what? That's just so bizarre. Then what are they going to do something like Harry Potter? When you already have an established viewing thing like House of the Dragon, but that's so interesting. Let's do a poll on this. I know I said we wouldn't do a poll to the end, but how would you like to watch HBO content? As is, weekly, binge the whole season, and then in parts. Okay, by the way, anyone who's watching can vote in a poll. You don't have to be a member to vote in the poll. Anyone can click and vote in the poll. So that's a big question. I can see some of you already would like, I'd love to binge it. What if you could get all the House of the Dragon episodes at once? I mean, for me, it's a nightmare scenario as someone who covers these shows. But let's see what they decide to do. It's really bad for people like me. But, some of you would prefer it, I mean, that's just really crazy. And Harry Potter, though, is a new property. And maybe people would like to get an 8-hour Harry Potter movie or a 10-hour Harry Potter movie in a single weekend. Just watch the whole Harry Potter like you do read a book, or play a video game. Which is actually, I never thought of it before. The binge model is a lot like when you buy a video game and you're like, that's my weekend. That's very interesting. I never thought of that before. But yeah, that could be just crazy. That's how they could drop Harry Potter. And I think a lot of people would actually really like that. I think, though, it would really hurt the conversation And I think that it would really rob us all of a shared experience. Because, I think I really like the weekly model, both as someone who covers content and also as a consumer. But I can't pretend that as a critic who gets to binge these things, that binges are pretty nice, you know? So we'll see what they decide to do. Let's give it another moment for voting, and then we'll get to the next. Oh, wow, so many votes. A lot of people feel have a strong thing about this. All right, I'm going to end it. And by the way, you might say, well, what about the experience of the show and like the artistry of the episodes? Netflix does not care about any of that. Netflix only cares about getting you subscribed and making you happy. That's the only thing Netflix cares about. And so that is a big issue. That's a big problem for making decisions like this. All right, so I'm going to end the poll. That's right, the delicate genius. It's true. That's why the Wall Street is such a problem for Hollywood. As you're saying, it's not enough to be successful. You always have to show growth and profit for shareholders, and that you're competing well with other entities. No matter how good Universal is doing right now, the shareholders are going to say, I can't believe you missed out on Warner Brothers, and now we're all so puny. And that's going to look really bad for them. So yeah, so the 63% of you want to keep it as is. That's really nice to see. But 28% of you would prefer to binge the whole season at once. And Netflix might feel if the 63% of you aren't subscribed to Netflix, they're going to go, well, who cares? And also Netflix has so much content. Can they do a weekly? Or they're like, man, I'm dropping other stuff. I can't have this weekly show. I got to keep dropping my content. So that's another problem that we have to worry about. 28% want to binge the whole season at once, and 9%. So the parts model sucks. Either binge the whole thing at once or do a weekly. I agree that the parts system is really not good. I'm telling you, this is why it's a really big issue. All right, so then let's go to the third page, baby. All right. Let's talk about the future. So I put this in bold in the top. Can we get people to subscribe? Can we keep them subscribed? That's Ted Sarandos has that on a pillow somewhere in his office, and probably at home too. That's all he cares about. And that's something you have to really think about. Whenever you're wondering how things are going to go, that's what Netflix is going to ask themselves. Having you go to a theater does nothing for them. They don't care. They're worth like $400 billion. They don't care. This model is working for them, and they just want to feed the beast. As you might recall, when the studios got into the streaming business, they likened it to a black hole. They said people's need to stream is insatiable. We keep throwing content at them, and they stream it and binge it so quickly that they want more. It's like that Kylo Ren gif of more. Right? And that's the problem. So Netflix does a wonderful job of feeding the beast. And now they have even more. They're like, oh, baby, I got all the Warner Brothers stuff. Get ready, open wide. And I think that's a big situation that they're gonna. They love that. They're the ones who created that. Let's talk theatrical. Okay, what's gonna happen to movie theaters? That's right, we're on the third page, baby. We're in the home stretch, and then we'll do a Q&A. All right, so what is going to happen with theatrical? As I said, Ted Sarandos said, going to the movies is an outdated system. And we're all like, what? I think it's funny that he only couched it as what people dream who make the movies. How about those of us who love the theatrical experience? I think our numbers are fewer and fewer these days. I love going to a movie theater here in New York City and seeing all these solo. It speaks also to the society and how people are more alone than ever these days. But we're kind of together at the theater. When I go to an early showing, sometimes if I miss the press screening, I'll go to like the first showing at like 2 p.m. And more women are doing this too, which I think is lovely. And there are all these people who are AMC A-listers, and they just go and see everything because they love going to the movies. So that's pretty exciting. But I think that it's sad that Ted Sarandos didn't think about all of us who dream of being in the theater, and that's something really special to us. So he also said this, this was his more, somewhat political statement. where it says that he said Netflix has no opposition to movies in theaters, even though he doesn't like the style of it. He says, my pushback has been mostly in the fact of long exclusive windows, which we don't really think are that consumer friendly. He says, I wouldn't look at this as a change in approach for Netflix movies. Well, of course not. Or for Warner Brothers movies. He says, I think over time, the windows will evolve to be much more consumer friendly, to be able to meet the audience where they are quicker. That means a shortened window, like the 2-week window that they currently offer. I think that's what he means by quicker. That's 14 days. Universal does 17 days for the smaller films. That's nuts. That's just absolutely nuts. If you know a movie is going to be on Netflix, like on Netflix, a service that almost everybody has, in a month or even 2 weeks, why on earth would you pay to see it in the theater, even for the biggest movies? You'd be like, 2 weeks, I can watch this at home. All right, so I'd say right now, you should count on everything that is planned on going to the theaters through Warner Brothers will continue to go to theaters through Warner Brothers, which means a movie that's already had they're not going to change any deals they've already made. And Netflix movies will take the same strides that they have, which is some of them do have a short run in the theater beforehand. But, and this is crucial, listen to people when they tell you who they are. He says, our primary goal is to bring first-run movies to our members because that's what they're looking for, which translates to that's what they're paying for. Netflix has said that in the past. They said, if we prioritize theaters, maybe we won't have as many subscribers because we'll stop putting them first. And that's why they have the most subscribers. So again, can I get people to subscribe? Can I keep them subscribed? That is crucial. All right. Theatrical windows. Disney is the only one holding on to long theatrical windows. Universal has had the most success, 17 days for small movies, 30 days for big movies. And Warner Brothers has started to copy Universal quite successfully. I think everybody's okay with that, although who's making billion-dollar movies? Really only for the most part, Disney. Minecraft did extremely well, but that's because that was a theater experience. By the way, that's also a Warner Brothers movie. Would Netflix put Minecraft in theaters? Heck no. They'd want it to be a K-pop Demon Hunters, but it wouldn't have been the same thing. I don't think it would have been the same experience. So I think theatrical windows are going to be like they are now, probably going forward. I don't know what they're going to do about a movie like Man of Tomorrow for DC. Is that only going to have 2 weeks in theaters? Maybe they'll do the 30-day, 17-day window like Universal and Warner Brothers have been doing. But everybody better put that in their contract. And at the end of the day, Netflix doesn't care. Netflix doesn't care. Netflix isn't in the legacy building business. Netflix is in the subscriber business. If you want to go make your movie somewhere else, go ahead and do it. They don't care. They have more than enough stuff that they can make. Audience needs versus the industry. A number of people are going to love this. You already pay for Netflix, you're going to get the stuff at home. But the industry is going to have a real problem because it's going to be it's going to become a much lower paying, much less. I mean, I don't know how you'll be able to make a living in Hollywood anymore. I mean, actors already can't make a living in Hollywood. You're going to have a situation where nobody can make a living in Hollywood. And that's going to be like, who's going to make this content? Will we go back to a studio system where you become a paid employee of the studio? I mean, this is going to be a really difficult situation. The Costco of entertainment, like what's going to happen? It's all in one place at one low, low price. But what does that look like? Where's prestige filmmaking? Warner Brothers is one of the most prestigious studios out there with a rich history of films, game changers, some of the best art and commercial films. But is that going to be what they continue to do? And does Netflix even care about maintaining that legacy? Netflix, they're not going to be putting together is Netflix going to make a 100-year retrospective? I mean, I don't know. Maybe if you'll watch it on the streaming service and it gets you to subscribe. That's right, Atomsphere. Nothing is sacred anymore. Madame says adapt or die. Well, I think that you have to wonder if you're adapting into a situation where you get phased out and you're no longer in the game. Like that's something to remember. I think a lot of people are like, I think everybody always assumes things are going to go great for them. They're like, oh, yes, everything. I'm sorry for those other people, but I'll be just fine. It's like when all these people in the Latino community voted for Trump and were like, he's going to go after those other people. And then they're like, holy crap. So it's like, and also everybody was like, oh, tariffs aren't going to hurt us. Tariffs are going to be paid for by other people. And then they're like, oh, wait a minute. This is horrible. It's like the same situation. So it's very similar, I mean, we're all screaming at you yet again that this is very bad. And we're correct. And so the question is, how quickly will you find out? Like it's F around and find out. But the question is, how long till you find out? Is it going to be right away? Or is it going to be like, I think it's going to be pretty fast. A lot of you might dream about working in the entertainment industry, but I don't know what's going to be left for you by the time you might be able to work in it. Okay. Flat subscription rate. You're still going to be getting all this Warner Brothers content for one fee, but is it going to be a low fee? That is the question. Considering how much you're suddenly going to get, what is going to be the price to get Netflix, right? And then the question is, what are the tiers going to be? Maybe they make a cheaper tier, but you can't get all the content. Maybe they're going to put more ads on it. Like, what are you looking at? I mean, that's going to be a really big issue. It's going to be very expensive. How much do you guys think it might be? Mystic says $30. Isn't it about $20 at this point? I don't know, 50 to me sounds like it might work out, but that's really fast. That's another reason you might get an antitrust situation. So if you pay $50 a month, your whole family can get entertainment and Warner Brothers entertainment at home. But if you're paying that much, you're going to go to the theaters less, and you're going to drop other streaming services. Right now, you have a couple streaming services, but you don't need to because Netflix has HBO and Warner Brothers. So you don't need Disney Plus anymore, maybe. Maybe you keep Disney Plus too, but you don't need Paramount Plus. You don't need Peacock. They're totally screwed. And how about the theaters? What are you going to do about the theater situation? You don't need to go to the theater. In 2 weeks, it's going to be on Netflix. So maybe you would pay $50, but what's that going to do to everybody else? And that's why it becomes an antitrust situation. So that's really shocking. Okay. I do think you're going to see a rise of premium theatrical experiences, which you're already kind of seeing now. iPick, dinner and a movie, right? Maybe you'll see theaters. Maybe in the near future, you'll have multiplexes where it's, Prime is pretty safe. You're right, your little dog too, because with Prime, you also get free 2-day shipping. So you're like free 2-day shipping and all this content. So that's probably pretty safe too. I don't know what poor Apple TV is going to do. That's nuts. Maybe that's a real problem for Disney. Maybe you'll keep, as someone said, maybe you'll keep only Netflix and Amazon Prime because you want that shipping. Oh. All right, so I think that premium theatrical experiences, I think in the very near future, especially now, you're going to have more and more multiplexes that are just all Dolbys and IMAXs. Because the only reason you would go to a theater would be able to get that premium experience. But why would you? Again, although I have to say, the Paris Theater here in New York City, which is owned by Netflix, plays a lot of movies. And even though I could watch those movies at no extra cost at home, I did pay to go and see Frankenstein. Well, actually, some of them I would have paid, but some of them were press screenings. Frankenstein, Wake Up Dead Man, and Jay Kelly. I went and saw all of those in the theater. But, I'm a cinephile. I love going to the theater, but a lot of people would make that same choice. And Netflix like, great, you went, but most people are going to watch it at home. And so I think that's why you're going to get a premium experience. It's going to become something that is something you treat yourself to. They're going to charge a little bit more. And I think I get a little nervous that it'll become a class division, right? That would be, wouldn't that be shocking? When movies started, they were entertainment for all. During the Great Depression, that was a wonderful time for movies because they would let you trade in things to go to the movies. My grandfather was paying to go to the movies with cans of beans or soup during the Great Depression. And it was something that used to be that's right, theaters will be like Broadway, Sean. Although, again, you can't see the Broadway show eventually at home. but that's what's going to happen, I think. And I think that's so sad because movies, the term is populist entertainment. Movies were populist entertainment. And that's just really crazy to see them go in a totally different direction. Now, I saw somebody tweet this last night, and I thought this was very smart. They said, perhaps the only chance that movie theaters have is suddenly for the law to go away. And I think they did rescind it. And they would allow you to, they would allow studios to go back to owning movie theaters. Netflix, in fact, owns movie theaters. Thanks, Sean. I'm going to answer all your questions at the end, okay? So Netflix can own movie theaters. Disney owns one movie theater in Los Angeles where they have all their premieres, the El Capitan Theater. And perhaps, just like the studios own streaming services, they would own movie theaters as well. And they would present premium experiences. For instance, if you want to go to the El Capitan, they sell premium experiences where they have things on display from the movie, and you get like a little cute little thing, like a merchandise, and they have it's like a very lavish theater. It's an old school Hollywood theater, and perhaps they might do that. And, perhaps all these other studios will have to buy theaters and create a special experience for those that it matters to. Now, I think here are some big concerns. Everything that Universal offered, Netflix does not. They have very little merchandise. You want to buy something for Stranger Things? Good luck finding it. K-pop Demon Hunters, they were although at the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, by the way, Netflix was a huge presence with a number of their shows spotlighted, which is crazy, shows and movies. So where's the merch? Warner Brothers used to have the Warner Brothers store. It was a wonderful place to go. I remember it so much. In fact, when I went to tennis camp, I got into a fight with the other girls because I went to all the stores they wanted to, and then I was like, I would like to now go to the Warner Brothers store. And they were all like, ew, why would we go there? And I said, see ya. And I had to leave them. And I was really upset because I'd gone to all the stores they wanted to, but I wasn't going to not go. So I went to the Warner Brothers store by myself, and I had a great time looking around. I remember that. And I came back, and the counselor was like, why are you back here early? And I said, no one will go to the Warner Brothers store with me. And he said, sounds like not very good friends. And I was like, tell me about it. But yeah, so it was fantastic. I love the Warner Brothers store. I miss the Warner Brothers store. I, to this day, miss the Disney store and the Warner Brothers store. They were incredible. But yeah, where's the merch? Where's the merch going to be? There's still a lot of Warner Brothers merch, but who are they going to, what's going to happen? All right, so that's a concern. What about marketing? Now, of course, there's marketing everywhere for Stranger Things. But what about the smaller Netflix shows? There's like no marketing whatsoever. Also, what about reviews? Netflix's review embargo is when the content drops. Well, they do away. I mean, with the movies that are playing in theaters for a little bit in advance, that's the only thing that saves us. But what's going to happen going forward? Will Netflix change? Will they apply the same review embargo date and the social media? I can't talk about their shows until the content drops. And Netflix does that because then you won't care about the reviews. You'll just go watch it yourself. And if they do that, will other studios follow suit? I mean, that to me is like a very scary thought. And it's possible. I mean, I'll just, again, adapt or die. I'll have to find a way. I mean, people will always want to talk about content, but it's just, I think that you might end up watching, maybe reviews will become even more important. Let's see. But, I think it's an issue. Okay. No theme parks. New theme parks. Although, of course, they have the Harry Potter deal with Universal Studios. I wonder how Netflix will feel about that deal. Now, they do have the Netflix houses that they just built. Look for DC stuff and experiences and these other properties. And I will say, to Netflix's credit, they've had some wonderful activations. I've done an activation for Stranger Things and Squid Game, and they were both incredible. They were, in fact, some of the best experiences I've ever had. And if they could offer a DC or Harry Potter or Game of Thrones activation at that level, I think they would be extremely successful. So let's see what they decide to do on that front. An activation is like, it's a temporary experience that they set up, where you buy a ticket. It was great. both times. I couldn't have had a better time. I I thought they were fantastic. Let's talk companies. DC Studios. I think that they, of course, are going to churn out DC content like you wouldn't believe. But the question is, do they really need to pay someone the head of DC content? Right? That's a big question. There's no one who's the head of Stranger Things. It's the creative people. Netflix doesn't really deal with something that's cinematic universes anymore. I mean, they have that's something that's going to be new to them. But, I don't think, I think another studio is like, ooh, what are we building? How is it going to look? What's the strategy? What's going to be in theaters? What's going to be on our streaming service? Netflix don't care. That's right. Dan Lin, who runs Netflix movies, can take care of it, to be honest with you. They don't need to pay. I mean, James Gunn makes a lot of money. They pay him a lot. And Netflix doesn't need to pay him. That's, I think, the big thing. I wonder how long his contract is. I wouldn't be surprised if it ended up not being renewed. They're having a press conference on Sunday for Supergirl. The trailer comes out later next week. I asked one of my contacts, I was like, are they still going to have that press conference? And it's, as of right now, they are. And it's weird to me that Gunn is going to be handling the Supergirl press conference. Hopefully the people who made the movie will also be in attendance. I think they're going to get asked a lot of questions about Netflix. So that's very interesting. But yeah, I don't think that Netflix is going to care that much about, like, are we doing a good job with our DC universe? Is it well built? They're like, do people click? Netflix only cares about clicks. I mean, I think they don't want to get into a fight with DC fans, but I think that would be new territory for Netflix. Oh, that's interesting. Netflix has never had to deal with that. They've never had to deal with the ire of fans before, and that could be a really interesting experience for them. So let's see what they decide to do. Now, I know a lot of you feel that the SnyderVerse is going to come back. And part of me felt that maybe when I first heard this news that you might be right. Because it's, something for people to click on, right? But you guys are getting a little, some of you understand what's going on. Netflix has been burned so badly by both Zack Snyder and Henry Cavill, I can't imagine them getting into business with either of them. So here's the problem. So yeah, at first I thought, hey, if it's something for people to click on, which is the whole reason they made, Mateo says, what will happen to DC Comics? Will they still publish comics? Or will they go to another publisher? That's a really interesting question. Does Netflix want to have a publishing company? Hopefully they'll see it as a necessary evil to be able to make, like, what's going to continue to fuel them with storylines. But again, Warner Brothers is in the comic book business through that. I think they probably wouldn't want to mess that up because it's the whole reason. So I think they'll keep DC Comics going, but I don't think they care that much about it, which is a concern. Again, I don't think Netflix cares, right? I mean, at the end of the day, they only care about data. Like, a lot of other people care, even executives care about legacy. Because they grew up with these things. A lot of times people in these businesses work in them because they loved them when they were little, and it was their dream to be in them. But Netflix is all about numbers. They're the ones who started the data crunch. They're the ones who started, what does the algorithm think? So they'll only care, like, for instance, if there's a comic book that's not selling particularly well, like Gotham Central never sold very well. But the powers that be at DC were like, it's a great comic. It's a prestige comic. The fans who do read it love it. It makes us look good. Let's do it. Would Netflix, they'd say it just doesn't have the numbers for us to continue with it. Would they apply that same logic to DC Comics? Would DC Comics become more tech-based and more AI, more algorithm-based? Also, would they want to distribute the comics themselves through Netflix, now that I think about it? Right now, I buy my comics digitally through Comixology on Amazon. Why would Netflix allow that? Why wouldn't they want me to come right to them? Because they're in the digital space. That's a very interesting question. Now, as for the SnyderVerse, if this were a couple of years ago when Zack Snyder first started at Netflix, then maybe you would have a point. But Zack Snyder burned Netflix so badly, particularly with the 2 Rebel Moon movies, But that's the whole reason that Dan Lin now is the head of a Netflix Film. They fired the previous head of Netflix Film because of his working relationship with Zack Snyder. New people came in at Netflix, watched Rebel Moon, and said, how much do we pay for this crap? And they fired the guy who made the deal with Zack Snyder for making that deal. So I'd be really shocked if they called Zack Snyder back up again and said, you want to make more expensive crap for us? I think that's the problem. So there's that issue. Then Henry Cavill. Henry Cavill was a huge problem for Netflix with The Witcher. He was very successful, but then he started causing a problem on set. And, you know, he also said he was unhappy. But when they fired him, nobody complained. So I don't think they want to work with him either. They're not going to invite these people back. So they're not. That's the main reason you're not going to see the SnyderVerse, because without Henry Cavill and Zack Snyder, it's not the SnyderVerse. And those people just, you know, Netflix had a really bad experience with both of them. So then, Harry Potter. Woo! This is really interesting. They're getting that upcoming Harry Potter show, which they're filming right now. It's now a Netflix show. That's really huge. We'll see what they decide to do. And also, will Harry Potter ever go back to being a movie brand? Would it ever go back to being a movie franchise? Or would Netflix turn it into a new Stranger Things? That's really interesting to me. I think it probably would just stay a streaming brand for them. I mean, they're putting the Stranger Things finale in theaters, but not in a lot of theaters. It's in very few theaters, and it's only for 2 days, which is interesting. So that's probably more what you're going to see. Like, imagine, wouldn't that be interesting? Do you want to see Man of Tomorrow in theaters? You've got 2 days to go. What would that be like? Or a week? And then you might as well just watch it on Netflix. Is that what's in our future? Then finally, what about AI? There was an article that I saw in the Hollywood Reporter, I believe, about how AI was a huge part of this deal that nobody's talking about. Now, Disney, of course, has said that they're very much into AI. Bob Iger has been very vocal about it, I guess because he doesn't want to make it even worse by lying to people. But they're going to allow you to use AI to make your own content, which they'll then own. And they're going to also, they of course want to be trained, the mighty algorithm. And they said that buying Warner Brothers is huge for Netflix, as they're going to get so much more data on you. They're going to get you to watch so much more stuff and spend so much more time on their streaming service. They're going to learn so much more about you. And that's another thing that's very important to them. That's crazy. That's just absolutely crazy. All right, so that's the situation. That's what we're dealing with. My God, let's bring up this Ted Sarandos thing and let's do the Q&A. Thank you so much for everybody who's been joining me for this. It's pretty freaking terrifying. Hold on. I'm not looking at your questions just yet. Give me a minute. I'm coming. Let me just mark the Q&A. All right, so let's do, oh wait, where'd it go? Okay, 20-minute, we'll do 20-minute Q&A. I'm gonna try and do both. Thank you, yes, I did get through all of that, Aubrey. It was a lot. It was a lot to get through, but it was such a fascinating conversation. I love conversations like this. I hope I paused enough in talking for ad breaks. The AI, speaking of AI, they'll only let me put ad breaks where I take a breath or a pause. And I was having such a good time. I kind of really spoke really quickly through that whole thing. So we'll see. All right. So I did page 3. I don't care, Bear. That last one was page 3. Okay. Now you're making me nervous. I didn't get to all the chapters. Yeah, that was page 3. Okay. Danny says, is Mammoth Bayonne Studios just a front for investors? Like to remind you, Squid Game wasn't union, but SAG Awards caved to net. I'm not sure about that question, Danny. I've never even heard of Mammoth Bayonne. Let's see here. I'm so glad you guys enjoyed my breakdown. That means so much to me because this is such a big story, and it means so much to me that you came to me to discuss it. So thank you so much for that. And I'm having such a great time talking to you about it. Quinn says, you think piracy would be a huge thing if subscription prices skyrocket? It'll be an issue for sure. But I think that Netflix will just become more aggressive about piracy. They have their ways. And also remember, Game of Thrones was the most pirated show in the world, but still enough people paid still to watch it that it still made a lot of money. Gromer says, welcome to, thanks for joining. Welcome back. Danny says, hi Grace, do you think that HBO could die as a brand if this deal happens? I think that HBO will become like DC Studios or something like that. It'll become solely a brand. It won't be a streaming service. It will become a production company, and Casey Bloys will be like Kevin Feige, and he'll create, but it would totally lose it would just become original Netflix shows if it didn't do if HBO shows don't air weekly at 9:00 for that weekly water cooler conversation, then I think they lose all of their personality and value. Araman, I think this is one of the longest streams I've ever done. Thank you, Sean. Let's see here. Railman says, apparently Warner Brothers is in early talks to license DC Comics IP to Universal theme parks. Maybe, that sounds like a Zazie play to me. Zazie will take the money wherever he can get it. But I don't know if Netflix would continue those conversations. They might, because Netflix has to offset this $83 billion price tag somehow, and they don't have their own theme parks. So potentially that could happen. And then I think that would, I don't know, I think people would make people happy, kind of. But I'm not sure how people will feel. Thanks, Stephen. Kings of Raful says, hey Grace, what does this mean for the one big Netflix IPs like Bridgerton, One Piece, Wednesday, upcoming Scooby-Doo? They'll continue exactly as is. Let's see here. Hold on, I'm coming back here. Okay. If it said page 2, I must have made a mistake in the typing. I'm sorry. Let's see here. What happens to Tolkien's books, Araman? Maybe they become Netflix streaming shows, I don't know. Prime Video has the rights still, I think, to stream content. Netflix would maybe have to only make I think Netflix would just wait it out, to be honest with you. Let's see here. I see a pretty big question here. Where is it? Oh. I'm going to get to it. Thanks, X-Men Superfan. I'm glad you would have gone to the Warner Brothers store with me. Phil says, what happens if this deal doesn't get approved? Well, Netflix will still have to pay Warner Brothers $5 billion. And there's some, maybe someone else will want to buy it. Maybe it'll bring an end to consolidation. Maybe this won't happen. But I think Wall Street's really pushing for it to happen. If the deal doesn't go through, Paramount or Comcast might still try and get it, but I don't know how they're going to feel in that once that amount of time passes. Isaiah says Netflix inherits A24. That's right, because A24 has the HBO deal. We'll see. I mean, that deal will eventually end, and A24 would have to renegotiate it. Carter says, thoroughly enjoyed the stream. Good luck with your corporate internship. My first job, I interned for a producer for several years, and I would read every piece of information that I filed, and I learned a lot about the industry. Let's see here. Lovely Six says, does this mean no more DC merch like figurines, comics, etc.? That's hard to tell. It depends how much money that they make off of that. Netflix is buying a merchandising division. Whoever handles that for Warner Brothers now works for Netflix, or now would work for Netflix. But again, the question is, does Netflix want to take that on? The name of the game these days is to streamline and to not be too big. That's what Wall Street wants. Sockley says, joining late, so you may have answered already, but is HBO Max going to go away or merge with Netflix? They have not specified, but I think it's like 99% that it's going to become a part of Netflix, because what benefit does it have Netflix for you to subscribe to two different services? It's like Hulu and Disney Plus were two separate things for a while, but they're not going to be. And I don't think these will be separate either. Aubrey still can't get over Harry Potter being a Netflix brand. How about DC Comics being a Netflix brand? That is a shocking development. Adam Sphere says, let's not forget that Warner started all this when they put the entire lineup on Max for a year. They trained the audience to ditch theaters. Yeah, but also Disney's culpable as well with the Fox acquisition. Clapback Cinema says, Grace, who's to say Netflix won't evolve with access to a studio lot and now an existing relationship with theaters? Because Ted Sarandos just said that it's an outdated model. The head of the company doesn't value theatrical experience. And so much so that even though it's going to make so many people upset, he still said it publicly. The day of the merger announcement. That's how strongly he feels about it. Thanks, your little dog, too. Landon says, hey, Grace, don't always comment, but I love your work. I'm curious to know what would happen if Netflix can't buy due to antitrust. Oh, so that's, again, the same question. Yeah, somebody else probably would buy, but the question is who would be in the market at that point and how much will have happened once we get an answer as to whether or not this will go through. Because first they have to go through the government approval, and then they're going to have to deal with the lawsuits. So this could be something that takes years to settle. Sahib says, what will this mean for future Game of Thrones prequels? They're going to air on Netflix. Steven says, Netflix buying is scary for the industry, but to me, Paramount buying it is even scarier. Well, yes, the idea of a right wing having a monopoly on news and media. Well, I mean, just because both options are bad. I mean, they're both bad options. That's why everybody was like Comcast, but they never seemed to even really be in it. Just think, if Comcast hadn't sat on their butt for so long, Comcast was thinking of buying this back when AT&T bought it. Since Comcast has been like, should we buy Warner Brothers? AT&T has owned it. Discovery has taken it. And it's gone all through this. Paramount has thought about buying it. And now finally they lost it. If only they'd bought it back in the day. It's like when Joe Biden decided not to run for president because, he felt it wasn't a good time for him. Oh, is it not good for your personal timing? Thanks for ruining life for everybody else. Okay. Alex, I think that Paramount is going to be very surprised at how things go for them. Let's see here. Thanks, George. Danny Boyd is clarifying. Monmouth, Netflix, Bayonne, Paramount Studio. It's their studio in Paramount. That doesn't really clarify, Danny. Let's see here. Thanks, James. I'm glad you thought this was very well prepared. I was working on it since the news broke last night. Kings of Raoul says, what are the three main reasons you think this won't go through? Antitrust, guild lawsuits, and potentially public opinion. Oh, hold on. Let me just answer it. George! I was like, I gotta get to this very generous question. And it's just saying, why are you so amazing? You're very sweet, George. All right, let's see. My grandfather's name was George. Let's see. He was a professional gambler. And he was a conductor on a train. Cool guy. He had a tough life. Okay. Let's see. Hold on. Karma says, do you think Netflix will build their own theme parks? No, I don't. I think that this deal with Universal is a good one, if it's indeed the case. I haven't seen this story, but someone said, I'm going to take their word for it, that potentially the talks are already in place, and Harry Potter has worked out so well. I don't think Netflix doesn't want, unlike other companies and other studios, Netflix doesn't want to be in a lot of businesses. They're not into diversifying their portfolio. Netflix is in the streaming business. They've always said that very emphatically. They're still saying it emphatically. So they don't want to be in the theme park business, but they'll take a cut of Universal's bottom line. Let's see here. Your little dog too says Casey Bloys could take over Netflix's TV division and DeLuca could take over film. Well, what about the people who are running it now quite successfully? Netflix isn't going to kick them to the curb. I think these people will stay for now, but I suspect you might see them phase out if Netflix really does gut Warner Brothers like this. I'll be curious to see what talent stays on. Let's see here. Oh, Anthony also just brought up the Universal DC theme parks thing. Apparently it's something that just came out. Oh, that's right, Isaiah. Technology is destroying the world to a degree. It's very scary. All the movies were right. Mech says, if the government blocks this deal, what then? Well, I've already answered. Some of these I've already answered. Let's see here. Silent Magician says, never mind the SnyderVerse. Let's talk Young Justice. Does this mean that Young Justice might see new life? Well, as you just said, if they stick Young Justice on the Netflix streaming service and people stream the heck out of it, then Netflix's machine algorithm will go, people like Young Justice, and they'll make more of it. The legendary movie critic says, do you think Netflix will change DC Studios' plan at Warner Brothers after Man of Tomorrow and the Bat? I think they'll change anything that isn't in production. If I wasn't standing on a studio lot in currently filming, I would be sweating bullets right now. Ted Sarandos will walk over and go, have you thought about streaming? He'll be like, oh my God. All right. Real Life Quinn says, at least more HBO DC would be more competitive on Nielsen. That's right. Lanterns is about to blow up, my friends. Let's see here. Lanterns comes out in Q3. I bet you it might even get delayed again so that it can debut on Netflix. Let's see here. Not Devon. I found that internship through school. The place you go to school should have an internship office that will outplace you. But if you're interested in interning, you could always reach out. But a lot of these days, people expect you to be at school so that you can get school credits, which I interned under the table because you have to pay for school credits. And I was like, do you want me to pay to intern here? That's ridiculous. So they let me intern under the table. I was like, you never saw me, except for the recommendation letter. Latin music lover says, selfishly excited to have Friends back on Netflix. That's true. The evergreen content is going to be Big Bang Theory is going to be on Netflix. It's just nuts. SMR Goose says, cheapest Netflix plan with ads is $8 a month, HBO $11 a month. Do you think this merger could automatically bump Netflix pricing to a minimum of $20 per month? Very possibly. I do think they're going to get you. I think $50 sounds reasonable to me, but it's going to, as I said, be very bad for everyone else, because what does that leave in people's entertainment budgets for other companies? PCH says, Grace, how important is it for Netflix to keep Warner's away from the competition? Huge. That's why they did this. This was a once in a lifetime opportunity for a studio to reach the level of Disney. And that's why everybody went after it. That's why you had Netflix, Paramount, and Paramount jinxed themselves. They felt for sure they were going to get it. And Comcast Universal. Netflix won the day. You like when I talk about the junk drawer, Jolene? Why did I even come in here? Oh, yeah, I wanted to watch Game of Thrones. All right. Jab Sabaja says, what are the chances of this not going through and Comcast maybe still getting it? I think it depends on a couple of things. I think there's a strong chance it won't happen. Everybody I'm talking to is like, we're going to fight this tooth and nail. But as for Comcast getting it, it depends how bad things get for Paramount over the next couple of months. And I think they're going to get pretty bad. I think the media and the industry is going to come after Paramount like you wouldn't believe. I think it's going to be just hate article after hate article after hate article. And they're just going to pound into them. And we'll see how much the Ellisons can take. The Ellisons are pretty badass. They could take a lot potentially. Melania Trump started a production company. Where's that going to go? I think there's a very strong chance it'll end up at Paramount. And I think that's going to be nuts if it does. And we'll see what the reaction is to that. I just still can't believe they're working with Brett Ratner. Did James Cameron call out Ted Sarandos? James Cameron can do it. He works at Disney. Ramon says, how do you think reaction culture that was created around events like Infinity War will influence moviegoing in the future? Well, people still, Stranger Things was still a big event, right? I think it'll just become more and more something you experience at home and by yourself, and the community will become more and more digital. So I really like going to the theater. And this is also on theaters. Too expensive, but not enough value for what you pay. People on their phones, people talking, not clean theater. It's just, again, everybody kept saying, this is really bad. This is really bad. And the theaters are like, well, what are you going to do? And now you surprise. It's like when Uber came in and undercut the taxi business. And the taxi business was like, holy crap. But, it's kind of balanced out. It took like 10 or 15, maybe 10 years. And, it used to be taxis in New York City were so bad, you couldn't step in them. You were like, oh my God, it's like riding in a garbage truck. But then Uber became too expensive. So people started going back to taxis. I actually now always take taxis. I rarely take an Uber. And so, but how long, what's Netflix going to have to do to make people go, I can't take it, I'm out? Let's see. Let's see here. Dakota says, Grace, do you feel a Hollywood backlash might influence Oscar voting? Oh, that's a great question. I didn't even think of that. Well, I got to look at the Critics' Choice nominations. Did one of you say Cynthia Erivo was snubbed? I have to see it to believe it. That is shocking to me, especially because at Critics' Choice, we nominate like a huge number of people. I have to go look at that. But I do wonder, maybe, you're even making me feel if maybe I should second guess my votes on that. I think something has to be done. Although we tried to take a stand against AI and that didn't go very well. Ooh, look at all these great questions. Hold on, I have another couple minutes. Hamid, I'd love to crowdfund and buy Warner Brothers Discovery. Jeremy says, what will happen to the Sony deal with Netflix? Well, it might be a problem, because of antitrust laws. Netflix was like, we'll take all the content we can get. Again, it's a black hole of insatiable hunger by audiences. But I think the government might be like, what? No. Or maybe they won't. The government doesn't stop a lot of things that it should. James says, do you think Netflix will sell off any parts of Warner Brothers they don't want? No, because they only bought what they wanted. Although I would like some clarification on what's happening with WB Games. Thanks, Phil. I'm so glad you like this stream. Hey, David. Mr. Coffee, Netflix is buying HBO Max. They're buying the studio and HBO Max. It will be okay, says if the deal doesn't go through, Zazie still wins. He definitely does, because of $500 million. And the $5 billion they're gonna, well, no, he wouldn't get the $500 million, but the $5 billion would be paid to Warner Brothers. AMC Nicole, your grandfather and your dad were both conductors as well. That's amazing. I'm sorry you're not interested in following suit, but that's fantastic. It was a great job with the. I don't know if it still has the same union protections that it did when my grandfather had it, but one of the reasons that he mostly was a gambler. But it allowed him to gamble. He gambled overnight on the train and between trips. Also, my grandfather would do a lot of, he would do like double back-to-back. He didn't have a very good relationship with my grandmother, so he didn't really want to be home. He loved my mother very much, but he didn't really want to be home. So he would be away for long periods of time, and he would just make money. Not only gambling, but also by doing lots of different stints. I'm glad you got a membership there, Rahai. Mike, will we know if this is going to go through? I think in the next few days, we'll have a pretty good idea if the government's going to fight it and if people are going to sue. I think probably in early 2026, like right after New Year's, we'll start to know if people might start filing the lawsuits right away. Maybe to be like, let's not waste our time. Let's not waste months trying to think let's not pretend this is going to happen. Although Blake Lively and Jake Baldoni promised us this huge throwdown in court, and that's never going to happen. So promises, promises. Mr. Coffee says that Ted Sarandos has already paid mighty he kissed the ring for Donald Trump. You know, Donald Trump loves to have the ring kissed. So he can be won over very easily if you make the effort and you know what you're doing. Look at Zoran Mandani. So if Ted Sarandos goes to the White House and says, you know, maybe Melania's deal is with us, they might get approval. And that might be how they do it. I just thought of that. Oh, how badly do you want to own? That badly. I do think Netflix wants to own Warner Brothers that badly that they would do they're airing the Meghan Markle show. Why not get Melania and have it be, have the whole set? Okay. I'm a little spicy today. It's a Friday. I'm excited. I'm hopped up on the energy of this story. Perhaps a little too spicy, but whatever. Danny is re-explaining here. Netflix and Paramount just did huge studio lot deals in New Jersey. Oh, okay. Tax incentives to 2047. Now those massive lots seem kind of like investor fronts. Oh, thank you very much. I'm glad you guys like the hair. I worked very hard on it. I was very windy here in New York City yesterday, and I was running some errands on the Upper East Side, and a leaf went smack into my face. Or no, actually, top of my head. So I had to wash my hair again last night. It's tough being in the city. All right, if a leaf hits you in the country, it's wonderful and so great. But here you're like, where was this leaf just moments before? You don't want to know. It's trash. That's where it was. It's a trash leaf. Right smack in the head. All right. I don't think those are fronts. I think Netflix didn't know they were going to buy Warner Brothers when they did that. So that's what happened. And then Rampage says, just when I was about to churn my Netflix account. Yeah, Netflix is like, you're not going anywhere. That's right. You're not going to go anywhere. And then Ross Gerwig says, do you think Larry Ellison's close relationship with Trump will hopefully make this deal fall through? Again, I think there's a chance, but now if I'm hearing that Ted Sarandos is over there, maybe not. Trump will be friends with anyone. Trump has zero loyalty. He expects the loyalty to come to him. He does not need to be loyal to you because he's the center of the universe as far as he's concerned. And that's right, Elise. Anything could happen, as I think we're very much finding out. Nothing surprises us anymore. Although I must say this came very close. We were like, what? Last night, we were like, who won? They actually won? What? We don't deserve nice things, apparently, like Comcast winning. All right, let me try and get through these super comments really fast because you guys paid for this. Okay, so hey, Grace, amazing coverage. Do you think Netflix will honor Ryan Coogler's ownership deal? Yes, they have to. It's a contract. They must honor that deal. Dory Does Voices says, Grace, do you think Universal will buy licensing rights to more Warner Brothers attractions? Yes, I do. And I think Netflix will be even more eager to do that. And I think that would be wonderful. I don't think it's worth sacrificing the Hollywood industry for, but it would be a nice consolation prize. You're like, wow, Hollywood's over, but this ride is amazing. Alfie says, I am so scared about this. I wish it was Universal. Don't want the movie theaters to die. It's going to be bad. I don't think they'll ever fully go away, but I do think it's going to become a premium experience. Let's see here. Oh, wow. Your little dog too says Paramount is looking at a hostile takeover. That's a great headline. But, you know, I think they're going to have to say how much will the Saudis give them. I don't know if it's, I don't know. I don't think, if I were doing that, like Paramount's losing their mind. They're like going to take a hostage now. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what that's happening. That's nuts. It will be something for us to talk about next week. They could do that. For those of you who don't know, a hostile takeover would mean that they would go to the board and they would say, we're going to offer you even more money. They'd have to have more money. And they would just flat out buy the stock. I think I disappeared for a second. Am I still here? Yeah, sorry. This stream was so hot, it glitched. That's an incredible headline. All right, well, I bet on that note, this conversation could very much change in an instant. So next week, perhaps on Monday, we'll be playing who should win, who will win Golden Globes. We'll be playing that on Monday. And then we'll probably be talking about Paramount's hostile takeover, maybe. Let's see what happens. Apparently, this story's just getting started. All right, everybody, thank you so much. I don't think Netflix is going to get this, but thank you, everybody, for a great stream. What a Friday. And don't worry, we have plenty more to discuss. Oh, we're going to have a great December. It's just so exciting. It's been so boring for months. I'm so happy that things are, I'm not happy about what's happening, but I'm happy about the drama and the tea. Thank you for joining me, members and everyone. I see you. Thank you so much. Please subscribe. If you're subscribed, if you leave a like, if you leave a comment, you're more likely to get a gifted membership. That's how YouTube decides. I don't decide who gets the gifted memberships. YouTube does it based on your interactions with this channel. So the more you like the videos, if you're subscribed, if you leave lots of comments, YouTube very much might give you a gifted membership next time. And this community is so generous, and gives memberships all the time. All right, you guys, I love you very much. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.